In this video, we will explain the call SOAP API action with XML. SOAP API driver can be used to read or write data from SOAP web service, that is cloud or internal data, or local XML files. Let's see SOAP API driver settings using the Compleo XML. In Compleo XML, run with, select the call SOAP API and click settings. Let's begin with the request configuration tab. In the Request Configuration tab, you can set up the API request by defining the function name, adding authorization details, headers of the request, and other settings. The protocol drop-down list shows the various types of protocol. You can choose from simple SOAP, HTTP GET, HTTP POST, and advanced SOAP options. Here, enter the path of the API you want to access, or you can use the variable to define the path. Function parameters are the names listed in the function's definition. To edit or delete a parameter, select the parameter and use these buttons. To add the new parameter, click on this button. And on the parameter window, insert the name, type and value of the parameter and click OK. You will see the newly created parameter in the list here. Now let's see the authorization tab. This tab allows APIs to ensure the data is being handled securely. Authorization requires authenticating the sender and verifying whether they have the permission to access the requested resource or data. Click on the authentication checkbox to enter the username and password if the server requires authentication, or configure a certificate if necessary. If you choose this option, you would execute the request without a certificate. Certificates lets you select the certificate from the existing certificate and enter the password. You can also authenticate the certificate in a file by selecting the file from the browse window or insert a variable. Enter the password. The headers tab here lets you add, edit and delete the headers. To check the sample response for the API to be executed, click the send button and view the sample response here. The response content type describes the format of the content that would be returned by the API if the request was executed. Activity log would be generated depending on your selection from the drop-down list. None will not generate any logs. Errors only would generate a log if only an error stopped the execution. Selecting all messages will generate logs for all statuses over your API execution. Here you can set the time in settings for Compleo to wait until the API is sent for execution. New tries are automatically carried out in case of failure. So in example, the system waits for 10 seconds to send the request for execution. If it is unable to, then it retries the same request automatically. You can also set the number of days you wish to retain the records in the database, after which you will no longer be able to see the records. By default, after 30 days, the records will be deleted from the database. Now let's explore the Error Management tab. The Error Management tab principally lets you condition when a response is being considered as a success or as a failure. To enable error management, click on the checkbox. Depending on the conditions applied here from the drop-down menu and the parameters added, an error is created. Let's explore this option with an example. With the help of Add New Parameter, we will create more parameters. Enter the name in the error and click OK. Let us create one more parameter and set the conditions. You can delete or edit the existing parameter by clicking on these buttons. In this scenario, a request will be successful if any of the following parameters are seen in the response. If all is selected from the drop-down, then the request will be successful only if all these parameters are included in the response. Similarly, if failed and any is selected in the drop-down, then the request will be reflected as failed if the response contains any of the following parameters. If failed and all is selected, then the request will be shown as failed only if all the parameters are seen in the response. Once the conditions are set, click OK. Now let's see the response processing tab. This tab lets you make necessary settings for using, saving and other settings with the response received for the called API. To activate these options, click on the checkboxes. This option lets you save the responses in a folder which is received from the server. You can also assign a custom name to the response file or insert a variable for the same. Click on Browse to assign the folder where these responses will be saved. You can use any existing or make a new folder and click OK or insert a variable. This option lets you choose properties from the drop-down list which will be saved in the response. The Format tab lets you specify the format in which the response is to be stored. In this case, we will save it in the XML format. Save the response option specifies the conditions under which the response will be saved. You can choose from always in case of success and in case of failure. For instance, if the request has error and has failed, a response will still be generated and saved. This will be applicable for all the responses with failure. Or if you choose always, then the response will be saved for all the request files irrespective of their success. Enabling this option, you may choose from these options. Select the input document option if you want the document on which the API request was executed to be the input file for the process. Select the binary from the response option if you want the properties returned by the API request to be taken as the input file for the process. By clicking this checkbox, only specific properties from the response will be processed as selected from the drop-down list. Similarly, you can select the format from the drop-down list. Choose this option to select a file from the DB or locally. Select the folder that you would like to supervise for this process. You have the option to enter the folder name or insert a variable. You can also browse an existing folder or create a new one. In this case, we will use an existing one. Choose this option to select the document and the destination for the document from the Send File to a Process Queue window and click Select. In the Call SOAP API window, you will see the option to import and export a file at the bottom of the screen. Click on Import to import an external XML file, the contents of which will be processed as the API request. Click Export to export the processed API request details into an XML file. Enter the name and destination to save the file locally. Thank you for watching this video.